they needed was a trigger to put it in place, and that is what 9/11 provided them with.
They only think in terms of power. Democracy and constitutional states don't play a role.
The truth is, conspiracies do sometimes occur.
I can only say the official story is so inadequate and far-fetched that there must be a different one. Michael Meacher and Andreas von Bülow, two former ministers. The Germans served under Helmut Schmidt 25 years ago. More recently, the Brit was a minister in Blair's war government. These two experienced politicians have grave doubts about what the Americans call the war on terrorism. More importantly, they think there's a lot more behind September 11th than we're allowed to know.
You have to consider what happened before 9/11, at 9/11, and afterwards. And I think a much better explanation than the war on terror, which I think is bogus, is given by the Project for the New America Century document. That was written in September 2000, just before or in the course of the US presidential election, which brought George Bush to power. It was written by a neoconservative think tank. It was called Strengthening America's Defenses. And what it says, I think, gives a much better explanation of what happened before 9/11, of why 9/11 was such a disaster, and why after 9/11 the US was so slow to go after either Al-Qaeda or Bin Laden, or didn't seriously try to do so.
The former British minister is referring to this document, Rebuilding America's Defenses, Reorganizing the American Armed Forces. This document forms the basis of Bush's military foreign policy. It says, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the United States must protect the new American century using military means particularly. Saddam Hussein has to go. But more importantly, we have to obtain military control in the region to get a grip on the world's raw materials, especially oil. For this, we need more troops, not less. It's hard to explain this to the American people. It will take years, unless we can use an event similar to Pearl Harbor as a catalyst to turn public opinion around towards spending more money on this struggle for world domination. And exactly 1 year later, this new Pearl Harbor happened. And the government immediately said, this is our new Pearl Harbor. Rebuilding America's defenses was not America's first research into possible threats to the country. In 1997, Jimmy Carter's security advisor, Zbigniew Brzezinski, was worried about the lack of American control in Central Asia and the Middle East. In his book, The Grand Chessboard, he claimed that control could only be gained by pursuing a much more aggressive foreign policy, including warfare. At the same time, Brzezinski realized that the Americans didn't really want a war. He claimed this attitude was only likely to change after a complete disruption. My wife was in the kitchen and called out, "Something terrible has happened." I saw it, and my first reaction was, "Who has anything to gain by this?" Initially, I simply followed what was happening. I sympathized with the victims and wondered about the consequences. As I had some experience in the Secret Service, I soon started thinking, I wonder what exactly is going on. Is there something else that they're not telling us? That's quite a statement. But the fact remains Brzezinski's total disruption happened on September 11th, enabling Bush to pursue an aggressive foreign policy.
You have to consider what happened before 9/11, at 9/11, and afterwards. Before 9/11, the US administration received a great deal of information that an attack was coming. First of all, there were 11 countries, including the UK, which gave their intelligence to the US authorities to that effect. Mossad sent 2 experts in August 2001, 1 month before 9/11, to the States with a list of 200 Islamic suspects, 4 of whom turned out to be the hijackers. None of them were arrested. On the 6th of August 2001, 1 month before 9/11, Condoleezza Rice had produced information about the possibilities of a hijacking, which could be related to the Intelligence Council's report. There was evidence which came from Zacharias Moussaoui, who was arrested. He was the 20th hijacker, most people think he was. He was arrested, and the FBI agent wanted to investigate his computer, which we now know contained some clues as to 9/11, but the information came through from the top levels of the FBI that they didn't want any arrests.
Meacher is referring to the Moroccan Zacharias Moussaoui. He was arrested by the FBI in August 2001. French intelligence claimed he could be linked to Osama bin Laden and a possible attack on the United States.